We are going to get started in a bit, so please come in, sit down. There's plenty of seats still left. Come on in. There are more seats at the front. And if we were to run out, there's more at Atlantic Sea. Okay, guys, I think it's time to start. This is the IETF 95 Technical and Administrative Plenary. My name is Jari Arko, Chair of the IETF. And the IETF, of course, is about new standards for internet connectivity. And I think we have found some this week. It's the three-prong internet access standard. The other notable thing that, we on the IOC, we get, lots of requests or complaints even at times. So after listening to years of complaints, the IOC has finally provided parking for the sailboats. Anyway, so to the real business, this is the welcome part. We're going to have a host presentation soon or talk. We're going to go through updates on hot topics. The purpose is not to provide a status update, but raise awareness of things that are going on, last calls and such, on topics that we think are relevant for you. And, on IETF itself, administrative, meeting calendar, NomCom, RFC editors' work, particularly on the new formats, trends affecting the IETF, which we have been working on a little bit. Unfortunately, we have a in memoriam section also in the agenda. We are going to talk about the Postal Award a little bit, and we're going to get a welcome to IETF 96. And then we're going to switch over to architectural stuff, the IAP part. Again, things that need your attention. We're going to hear also a report from the recent IAB IoT Semantic Interoperability Workshop. And then we're going to have an open mic where you can ask questions or make comments, or we can discuss any of the topics in the preceding presentations. And I just wanted to say thank you for the hosts, LACNIC and Internet Society, this time. So without your support, we could not have this meeting. So it's really, really essential. So thank you for that. We also have a ton of other sponsors sponsoring various parts of the IETF meeting, particular breaks, connectivity, which has been general sponsors. So thank you for that as well. And I wanted to ask Carlos to join me here on stage and give us a host welcome.
Thank you, Jerry. I just want to say a very strong welcome to Buenos Aires. Thank you all for being here. I believe you all guys and we deserve a bigger round of applause. This has been in discussion for such a long time. I barely can remember when the first open mic in these plenaries, someone actually went to the mic and mentioned the possibility of doing an IETF meeting in South America. This is, for me at least, is like I say in Yokohama, this is sort of a dream come true. So I don't want to bore you with a long speech or anything, but I would like to highlight the fact that I'm just standing here before you, but I'm paraphrasing a very famous man. I'm the one who's standing on the shoulder of giants. This is the product of a work of many people and many organizations, and they all deserve their recognition. Let me show you what was one of my worst fears about this week, and it has a name. Its name is 95 attendees. So, but I think, I don't want to claim victory just yet, but 95 attendees so far hasn't been that much out of the ordinary. So this is, I would say, just another IETF meeting, which is a good thing. So thank you so much. Welcome to Buenos Aires. Enjoy the good wine, the good music, the good food, and let's have a really, really successful meeting. Thank you so much.
So I really want to thank you and everyone else, your organization and everyone who's been working here, and of course all the local participants who are coming from this region to the meeting. So that has made this possible and is making it a very positive experience. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Eddie.
Okay. So we are going to go into the updates or hot topics, and this is my part, ISG and IETF in general. I'm going to cover the meeting and participants a little bit, talk about something called the Ombuds team, talk about mailing list facilitators, talk about code, which is obviously important. How did that get going here at this meeting, the code sprint and the hackathon. Talk a little bit about new rules or slightly changed rules around IPRs. We also have a new Node-well proposal in the progress, and then we'll have some recognition. And as usual, there's more material on the net, so please take a look at that. And so the meeting and the participants. So this is, we are, I think, this morning, 1,002 participants in this meeting. And, maybe slightly less than we expected or projected. The projections, of course, aren't always totally accurate. But this is the first meeting in Latin America. This is the second meeting in Southern Hemisphere. We have a very large number of local participants, many newcomers and locals in the hackathon, that's just one example. A very active and interesting technical program. And as already discussed, active support from lots of people, LACNIC, the IETF LAC group, many IETF participants from elsewhere in the world coming over, discussing in various meetings. So this, like, engaging the IETF more on a region is not about a meeting. So this meeting is important, but it's much more than that. So that is the important part. We have to remember to keep doing it also after the meeting. So please keep that in mind, and if you can, do travel around the world and discuss with other interested internet technologists in different areas. We also, I noted, had a very large number of, or we think we had a large number of remote attendees. We can't necessarily exactly measure that, and we certainly haven't measured it before very accurately. But we did have quite many, and we even in the IEST have taken this to heart. So this is from our first meeting this week. Our security ADs, one here and one back home with her baby. So it seems to work, this remote attendance thing, even for the steering group. So that's good. The other thing is that, when we see the, large numbers of people participating online, which is of course what we are about at the IETF and sort of this remote participants, I did get a little suspicious when I saw this. Virtual attendee number 14, busy doing pings and DNS queries and such. And the question is, were these counted? And if they were, can they also participate consensus calls and such? So I don't know about that. The usual slide, the pie chart about the participants, again, 1,002 people this morning. And by the way, you always see a little different numbers, and that's partially when you actually measure. And we measured this morning, and we took the number from a year ago from Wednesday morning or midweek, so to give you a reasonable comparison point. We are 55 countries, 140 people here from South America. IETF 92 indeed was 1172 people on site and 57 countries, and that was in Dallas. And this is the breakdown of the pie chart you can see. So I think a very reasonable turnout for this meeting. And yes, going forward. So Ombuds team. So that's kind of if you haven't seen some list discussion, that may sound a bit odd. So what that is actually is about anti-harassment. So a couple of years ago, the IST adopted a policy for the IETF, an anti-harassment policy that we do not want to have harassing behavior in our meetings, and we want professional behavior, and we expect everyone to abide by those standards. And then last year, we concluded writing a PCP that defines procedures for dealing with, should we have any harassment and how can you get help and so forth. That PCP has now been published in March as RFC 7776. And then we have set up a team that can be contacted for help, advice, and possible actions, should there be an issue. And then the team's name is Ombuds team. It comes from ombudsperson, which means basically a party assigned to deal with problems fairly. So we have this team, and who are they? So the members are Linda, Alison, and Pete. Thank you for standing up for that. And could you actually stand up here as well, so you could we could see where you are? So this team and these people are very friendly. If you have any concerns, please talk to them, and your concerns will be kept in confidence, as defined by the RFC. And the contact information, unless you can catch them directly in person, the contact information is on the IETF webpage. The other kind of similar thing is that we have established what we call facilitators, or people who are tracking discussions and making sure that they stay as productive as possible. And this is for the IETF at ietf.org mailing list. And this is a bit of a special list for many reasons. First of all, it has a fairly large number of people, it has a lot of traffic, diverse topics, because it's not a working group list. It has no designated working group chair. I'm supposed to track it, but I'm also doing a few other things, so I can't read it really real time. And sometimes discussions get a little bit lengthy, or there's too much repetition, or even too heated. So we added 3 people to be facilitators to help guide the discussion. So some of the things that these guys will be doing, for instance, is that if it seems like you have a lengthy discussion that is not really going forward, maybe it's time for somebody to write the draft, compile an actual document with a proposal, all parts included, and then make that proposal, as opposed to just keep discussing in email, and then come back when that draft is ready. So if you get suggestions like this from the facilitators, please listen to those. And the The facilitators are SM, Carlos, and Christian. You could also stand up too if you're in the room. SM is probably not here, I think. Thank you. And again, this is not a change in roles of ADs or when they deal with last call documents on that list. This is not a change to what the sergeant at arms does for the list. So those people deal with basically abuse of the list for improper purposes, posting rights suspensions or any of those things. So those still stay as they are. I did want to say one thing that I think I at least find myself always useful to remind myself of that. So discussion style, please remember to treat everyone with respect and think when you are about to provide some criticism, how you present that criticism. You may have an issue with a draft, may have an issue with what somebody said, but frame it as an issue, not as a personal thing. Consider how it could be corrected instead of blaming that's wrong. Keep in mind that you might actually learn something that that the other guy is saying or thinks because you did not understand everything. That I know it seems like a stretch at times, but it might actually happen. So keep that in mind. So do think about this when you interact. I know it's easy to get into these heated discussions that this is the way to do the technical thing, but the people are actually quite important. The next topic, IPR rules. So we have this RFC 3979, and it's been around for 11 years, I think, and we are now updating it. Scott Gradner is one of the authors of this document. And this basically covers how IETF deals with IPR and technology, which is, I'm not going to try and summarize it, but it has to do with how you declare if you know that you have IPR on a particular topic, you should declare that, and so on and so forth. So that RFC has a fair number of text in it about the rules for detailed situations. It's now being updated based on experience that we gathered. There's an ongoing last call. I don't remember the last call finish date, but it's somewhere towards the end of this month, I think. Please pay attention and comment. So one of the things that is being updated is a crisper definition of when are you participating in a discussion. So as an example, if I'm participating in some debate about a draft and I have read the draft and I'm aware of some IPR that I might, for instance, have on that, then I'm supposed to provide a declaration that there is this IPR. Let other people know what the situation is. But if I'm not following a particular working group, then I obviously cannot know what's going on. So that's I'm trying to define that carefully there. So please pay attention to this. I know it's yet another boring legal administrative thing, but it actually does affect our lives a bit. And the note well, we had the note displayed here on the screen a while ago, the current one, but we are updating. I wanted to write a new one that is, in some sense, better. And this is, I think, in the second community review, we had one version with lots of issues discovered, and made another one, and now hopefully that's a little closer to the end result. But the process is going on. I think that we said April 8th, which is coming up on Friday, but I don't think we're going to deal with it next week. So in the next ISC telechat, whenever that is, in a couple of weeks, we'll talk about this. So please comment on that as well. And what we made it do here is that this is more of a reminder of stuff than a definition of things that you need to do. So it kind of reminds you that, by the way, we have some policies on X, Y, and Z. Please pay attention. And this is the new version. It's longer than I would like it to be, but it does point to a fair number of things, including anti-harassment procedures and code of conduct and copyright and the IPR stuff. It will also point to IETF privacy statement once the IOC completes that. Coding a hackathon. So obviously the IETF is about running code. We've always been about that. Seems like in the last couple of years we realized that even more forcefully. So we have typically many events around that. There's some Etsy plug tests occasionally. I don't think we had one this time. But we always have a code sprint, which is about people here working together on our tools for the IETF that we personally feel that we need, and then working on those. And please join the next one if you come to Berlin. It's a really, really important activity. And then we have the IETF hackathon, which is about sort of more general purpose hacking around ideas, perhaps based on IETF standards, or hacking on new ideas that might later become some IETF topics. We also are, I hope, about operations. There's operations-related forums. DNS ORG met here this week before the IETF. The local IXP people have an association that also met, which was nice. So I'd be very happy to have more of these events in different IETFs. So if you have a group that would like to meet, ask us if something can be arranged or rooms can be reserved or something around the IETF. And the hackathon, I just wanted to talk about it briefly. A couple of pictures here. I can't go through everything. There's a wiki on the meeting page. You can go to the more of the details of tons of different systems. I think 10 or 11 different prototypes were being coded from very broad systems and long-lasting things to really tiny edits of particular features. And this year has it's been sponsored by Huawei. Thank you for that. We need sponsors to cover the costs of the hackathon, and Huawei has stepped up for that. And of course, the reason why we have these hackathons is sort of increase the pace and relevance of the kinds of things that we do in the IETF, make sure that we're connected between open source and standard, and bringing new people, bring new ideas. And I don't know, maybe those are the rational reasons. I just personally like the hacking thing, whether it's for the IETF tools or for some other stuff. So I like it. Do join it in Berlin. And highlights this time, 100 or maybe a little bit over 100 participants, 30 or so more new ones. It's a really good result. Over 10 new IETFers from Argentina and Africa. Really good. And not just like newcomers in their own corner, but they integrated well into the other teams doing cool stuff. So I think that's a success. New project, TLS 1.3 implementation put live on the net during the weekend. Not too bad. And other virtual packet processing engines and big data arrangements, lots of other things. So do read the wiki and see what they have. But my point is, you can do cool stuff. And if you have projects, the IETF is a good place to meet for that your global team, for instance, or to get some local students to work on your problem. We also had some joint things between the code sprint and hackathon related to Yang tools as an example. Some of the results of the week were discussed in working groups. Another success. There will be some of these projects on display at the Bits and Bytes tomorrow, and the proceedings will be in the data tracker. It's good. And in Berlin, Saturday to Sunday before the IETF, everyone's welcome. Start planning now. And then I had some recognition. So First up, as you know, the March IETF, the IETF leadership is being renewed, and some people step down, others step up. And I wanted to ask Martin and Barry and Brian to come up on the stage. And the AD role in particular, this is, varies somewhere from, 30% to 100% of your time. These people have done a lot of work. Martin, for a while, was running in an area all by himself when we couldn't give him a second AD to accompany him. And all of them are doing a lot of work, not just for their own area, but in the ISG we have a number of IETF level issues, and we do spend a lot of time discussing those things as well, and it does take your time, for the sake of improving something, whether it's silly rules about IPR or important rules about IPR or something else. It's work that needs to get done. So it really is a major effort to be an AD, and I've been very happy working with these guys. Thank you. And I will be handing a plaque to each and every one of them, although we have just one copy here, and the real one will be mailed to you, we promise. The plaque is in the check, I mean the mail. Yes, we have some presents for you. We need to go to the next slide. And they ride to the sunset. But that's not all. So, Scott, where are you? There you are. Come on up. So, I wanted to recognize Scott because he has a very long IETF career. He's done so many things, and he's told us that he's going to be retiring in June this year. We will miss him. Hopefully you can still participate somehow at least, but or come meet us at least. And he's done just so incredible number of things, been here for a long time, published numerous RFCs. I think you're the author of the most cited RFC, 2119. You've been an AD in 4 different areas. I'm not quite sure I grasped that completely, but that's amazing. And you are being a board member many places, current ISOC board and current IOC member, for instance. And I mean, we can keep listing these things. I think for me, what's been really important, you really have been the person to look up to, so it's always been very easy to work with you. You always have an intelligent answer, and you always go all the way to think about topics and trying to do the right thing. So thank you for that. And I can't really, I don't really have the words, so I'll just quote what they say in the press. And yeah, so it's the economist, so clearly. And we have some presents for you. And that is not all. So I want to present Scott the Mother of Consensus Award.
Well, thank you all. It's been a good time. I've done things here that I wanted to do that I didn't know I wanted to do them. And I think in general it's been positive, certainly for me and hopefully for the organization. But the time does come, and it has. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott, for everything.
I Hello?
Try it.
Hello? Not working? Oh, it is working. Okay. I know that you didn't want to list a long list of things and distinguished career that Scott has had. Most of us have known him quite a long time, and he's had quite a long distinguished career. But I wanted to add one thing to the list that you didn't have there, which I think is important to the IETF. We are going to have a presentation later about the Postel Award, and I think it is worth noting that Scott had received the Postel Award. John Postel, of course, got the first award in 1999 posthumously, but Scott received the next one in 2000, and I think it's worth pointing that out to this community and acknowledging that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, that's my report and the recognition part. We are going to move on in the agenda and talk about various administrative topics. Ray and Leslie, can you come up? And Tobias.
My, that's bright. All right. So my name is Leslie Daigle, and as a result of IOC elections this week, I am the IOC chair. I would like to take a moment to thank Tobias, who was IOC chair for just about a year, having undertaken the role rather abruptly when Chris Griffiths stepped down early last year. Tobias took over the IOC chair role from having been the IETF Trust chair. So thank you very much for your efforts, Tobias. Okay, so I just want to give a little bit of an overview of some of the IOC activities really briefly, because Ray actually has all the detail in his slides, and he will give you the appropriate guided tour. I just wanted to call out a few things to make sure that you knew that we heard them and are thinking about them and talking about them internally. We have had a lot of feedback about hotels and availability. There is a meeting venue, BOF, tomorrow, Thursday, at, must-read slide, 1620 in Pacifico A. So if you have comments, please go to the BOF and share them there. As you'll have noted from Yari's earlier slides, remote participation at the meetings is clearly important and perhaps increasingly important. And we would like to hear more feedback about how that's going and expect to evolve that going forward. Ray's going to cover the numbers in detail. I want to emphasize there are two parts to what Ray is talking about in our budget numbers. This is the point in the year at which we will reflect on last year's budget, so the 2015 financial performance of the IETF as an organization. And there's also important numbers about 2016, even though we have only just started it. The IETF is turning 30, and we're still trying new adventures for us. We're very happy to be in South America for the first time, but the numbers will also show that perhaps we didn't predict how that was going to play out quite as accurately as might have been helpful. That's important to know, but it's also important to know that we're tracking that and we're moving on from it, and it's sort of business as usual. And certainly meeting here gives us the opportunity to know how to plan for and expect our next trip to South America. I also wanted to point out that there is the IOC retreat coming up in early May. There'll be a number of the usual sort of internal topics to cover as we organize for the year going forward. And in particular, we will be looking at the BCP 101 compliance, either updating our compliance or BCP 101, whichever is appropriate. And also considering having a more formal look at how to evaluate the IOC's function for the IETF in general. So I think that's all I wanted to say. Ray, would you like to drive?
Thanks, Leslie. So the IOC gets to work very directly and closely with the hosts of these meetings. And we, as Yari said, we couldn't do it without the hosts. But for 12 to 16 weeks prior to the meeting, we're having weekly calls in order to nail down all the details. And it's not, some of it's a very challenging experience. Let's talk a little bit about Buenos Aires. We had anticipated there would be 1,070 paid attendees. We fell a bit short on that. However, we exceeded our wildest expectations with regard to remote participation. We have 555 people who have registered to attend this meeting remotely. That compares to 77 in Yokohama. It also includes more than 30 universities around the world: Aachen, Munich, Philippines, Delhi, Boston University, Ohio State. They're all over the world watching this performance here, watching what you're doing, learning about it, hoping to contribute. A lot of first-timers, almost 270 first-timers, and we have 188 from India. Now, we don't have a lot that come from India to attend our meetings, but we obviously have a group that's very interested in what we're doing. Visas. We had a bit of an issue with visas. We had issued 200 letters of invitation, and about half of those were from China. About 100 from China, and 81 actually are attending this meeting. I want to particularly thank Christian O'Flaherty, a colleague of mine at the Internet Society, for all the work he did in unraveling the red tape at the Foreign Ministry, and also with freeing the knock equipment at the customs to make sure it got here in time so that the knock was operational. So Christian, are you here? There, stand up a second, would you? Christian O'Flaherty is the Senior Development Manager of the Latin American Bureau, and thank you very much. I'm proud to be associated and a colleague of yours. Registration revenues, again, because of the shortfall in the attendance numbers, were about 90K below what we had anticipated. Sponsorship revenues were a bit lower than what we had expected as well. We'll plow through that. Yokohama, 2015 was a very successful year, and it ended very well with Yokohama. Our attendance was over 100 more than we had projected. We had registration revenues close to $95,000. Sponsorships were a little bit below budget, but more than offset by other revenues. At the end of the day, we had $98,000 more than we had anticipated to pay off other operational expenses, such as the Secretariat, RFC editor, IASA, and those things. Some meeting announcements. I think you're aware that we're going to Chicago and for IETF 98. That was originally scheduled for Montreal, but it turns out the hotel in Montreal is undergoing renovations. So we had to change our plans. 99, this is all 2017 now. 99 is Prague. And I'm very pleased to announce that Comcast, NBC Universal are hosting this particular meeting. Thank you very much, and I think Jason and Glenn Dean are here, and thank you guys, appreciate it. We have an announcement for IETF 100. We have been negotiating this contract for more than a year and a half. It's unbelievably complicated and surprising, so we'll get to that in a second, but let me tell you about 102. We're going to be in San Francisco. We're going to be in San Francisco for IETF 102, and this is now 2018, and the host is going to be Juniper and Tom Walsh and that team. Thank you very much. See you there. And we got such a good deal in San Francisco, we bundled up a two-pack. So we're going to go there in July of 2021. At some very favorable rates. It sometimes does do well when you can bundle some things together. I think you'll be pleased. So now a little drum roll for IETF 100. No drum roll? Yeah. Here we go. That was a lot of darn work, I got to tell you. And Laura Nugent from AMS, who actually does the day-to-day grinding out of that contract, thank you very much for that and working with me to get that done, and with ISOC. So this is a big deal. The other thing I'd like to note here and announce now is that the host for Singapore, IETF 100, another drum roll. Yes, good. Cisco. So thank you, Fred Baker and Dave Ward and the whole team from Cisco. Thank you very much. Projects, tools, and contracting. For a year, I think it's a year, Greg Woodbrand, Joe Hildebrand, yeah. I think it's about a year we've been working on a whole revamp of the IETF website. Now we're doing the content transfer, and we're going to do some tweaks, some additional tweaks that turned up during the course of the development, but we expect to be completed by Berlin. And one of the attributes of this is that it'll be easier to use on your mobile device. So I know you've been anxious about that. It's a feature we wanted to bring you because of the demand. No? Okay. We have some other tools under development. These three tools we delivered in the first half of this year. One of note there is the RFC editor projects and stats. We're doing a lot more work now with the RFC editor. So we'll tell you about that in this next bullet. We have to develop the tools for the new RFC format. There will be an RFP issued for that this year. You may have noticed on the list that there's a conflict between the Tor and Cloudflare CDN settings, and we've resolved that particular conflict. If you're having any more difficulty, let us know so that we can address it. The other bit is that we have adopted new administrative procedures. There was an RFC that was issued, and we, after discussion with the community, and then the IOC adopted the procedures. 2015 financially was a good year, particularly because of the higher attendance. We had 300 more people than we expected during the course of the year, so that's a good thing. And so we're 7% up over budget for that particular item. Sponsorships pretty much met expectations. Expenses were below our budget by 2%. We were even under our meeting expenses despite the higher attendance by 1%. So these aren't big numbers when you're talking about a $6 million budget. So we did pretty well there. One thing we were a little disappointed we didn't expend all of our capital tools development money of $215,000 last year. But the reason for that is that we're rolling over the RFC formatting tools for the development in this particular year. So we'll get those things done for you. So this is kind of a high-level snapshot of the 2015 budget. The income of $4.4 million. You can see the total expenses of $5.9 million, of which meeting expenses are 45% of the total costs. Tools development, $167,000, and a direct contribution cash that pays for the delta between our revenues and our expenses from the Internet Society of $1.7 million. And it's typically a number between $1.6 and $2 million every year, in addition to the fact that ISOC folks are people who are going out and acquiring sponsors of a value of between $1.1 and $1.5 million every year. So when you hear from them, answer the phone. Thank you very much. Because if you don't answer the phone, we've got to raise the reg fees, okay? We don't want to do that. We have a program called the IETF Global Host Program. This is a program in which companies step up and sign an agreement with the Internet Society on behalf of the IETF to host 3 meetings over a 10-year period. And today we're going to announce and have a commemorative signing of the latest global host participant, Ericsson. Okay, so I want your initial here, here, here. Sign it here and here, okay? There we go, good. You have anything to say for yourself? Well, thank you very much. On behalf of the IETF and the Internet Society, thank you very
much. Thank you, Ray. I've been asked, very, very briefly, I've been asked to tell you about why we are doing this, and also about the experience of signing this deal. So first of all, why Ericsson is doing that? I mean, the obvious answer is the technologies the IETF is developing. When our vision, we call it the Network Society, requires some technologies to support it, and many of these technologies are developed here. Internet of Things, management and orchestration, anything that supports virtualized environments, I mean, there's a list that, you wouldn't be surprised of the technologies I would talk about. But second, and equally important, is we need the IETF as a forum for industry alignment. So for us, it's very important to be able to talk to all industry players, that they are gathered here and actually agree on important topics. So we shouldn't forget about that part, which is not, completely the same as the technical work here. So that much about why we are doing that at Ericsson, and we are very pleased to announcing this today. Second is, about the actual process for signing. And I would like to say that I'm really happy about what, all the efforts of the Internet Society in making, being able to sign this so much easier than before. They can work with companies to have it, like recurrent payments. You can sponsor, smaller things, bigger things. So I would like to encourage all of the companies that are here to basically go work with them and see, in which ways you can support the IETF and its operations. And, thanks a lot.
Now, Ericsson is joining 4 other companies, and I'd like them to come up if they would. Fred Baker from Cisco, Jason Livingood from Comcast, Glenn Dean from NBC Universal, Tom Walsh from Juniper. Team pictures. Okay, here. Of course, that's not yours. See, what I didn't explain earlier, Gonzalo, was as it's presented to your name here. This is kind of our blank, but as I think Yari and Leslie said a moment ago, that we're celebrating 30 years as an organization. And I think one measure of success is our staying power and our ability to continue to contribute to the extension and improvement of the internet. And here we are in Latin America and celebrating our 30th year. We chose to be here in our 30th year. Carlos, Lacnic, all the folks .ar, Nick.br, Cabase, we wanted to be here with you. And hopefully it won't be another 30 years before we come back, okay? Just a few miscellaneous things. Leslie mentioned there's a BOF going on this Thursday. Please come out. There is a list. You can join the list and participate in understanding and providing us feedback with regard to how we select our venues, what the criteria is that we use, what the requirements are, what the processes that we follow. We actually begin doing this 4 years out. We are looking at 2019 for venues, for example. We have a meetings committee, and they consider all this. We have a site team that makes trips to all of these venues. Jim Martin, Laura Nugent, Marcia Ballou, Stephanie, and brings back information by which informed decisions are made. And of course, we make those decisions 3 years and 2 years out. Things may change, but hopefully they'll stand the test of time. So if you're interested in knowing how the sausage is made and providing input into the sausage making, please show up Thursday afternoon. There is an ongoing discussion about sustainability, IETF, and the things that are important to us to sustain the organization. What is the organization going to look like 3, 5, 10 years from now? And what do we need to sustain it with that kind of vision in mind? So IOC is contributing to that discussion, but frankly, what we need to hear from is the community to share your vision about what this organization is going to be like. You can see with the remote participation platform that MeetEcho has developed that there are changes. We're going to have more people worldwide who are participating in individual working group sessions than perhaps that are in the room. And how do we integrate them into the process of the participation? And hopefully that's going to be a good thing. We also have an IETF privacy policy. The IOC is considering adoption. We have it out for comment. Please take a look at it. We've had some feedback along the way already, and we're continuing to iterate that document. We have our, every meeting we have a Thursday Tech Talk, which is hosted by the host of the meeting. And we have Oscar Robles, the LACNIC CEO, who'll be speaking on the internet deployment challenges in the third world. And go back, there we go. And that's Thursday during lunchtime. So if you have some time available, please go and listen to Oscar. As Yari mentioned earlier, Huawei has stepped up to be the sponsor of each hackathon session in 2016, and we're very appreciative of Yizao and the Huawei team for doing that. Bits and Bytes Thursday night. Bits and Bytes is also, we have several tables that are sponsored. We're also going to have a social light environment on one end of Bits and Bytes. And so if you want to do some tango dancing, you may have an opportunity. Thank again to our sponsors for connectivity for Level 3 and iPlan, and New Star for the welcome reception, and Cabasa, ICANN, NIC.BR, and .AR. I also want to acknowledge the work that the Code Sprint folks are doing, and 18 people there this Saturday. Everyone gets a t-shirt. You may want to attend just for the t-shirt. They're really good. If you're interested in this, Robert Sparks and Henrik are the people to talk to, and they'll get you engaged. So kind of mixed emotions with this. We're missing our colleague and friend and tech wizard who tweaked the entire access points in the hotel in Paris and got that to work. Cheliot. We have volunteers, and we can see that we have 14 volunteers led by Jim Martin, who make this thing work. Verulan is our contractor, led by Con Riley. And then the Meet Echo folks who are becoming more and more embedded into the operation of the IETF meetings. And then they're led by Alessandro. And thank you guys for all your work. And there is no backup for this. This is it, okay? You'll have a chance to shot at us a little bit.
Thank you. Yeah, okay. Hola, buenas tardes, amigos. So, I thought, as we are in Argentina, so maybe start with the adequate language. But actually, this is as far as it goes with Espanol for me. So, the rest will continue in English, I apologize. So normally, trust reports are quite short, which is due to the fact that actually trust is maybe not too busy, or sometimes we cannot show too much. But actually the last year was a lot of work for the trust. And you will see that there's quite a number of things. And especially with that in mind, I'd like to thank the outgoing trust chair, Benson, for pulling that weight in the last year. And he came on the IOC, and just a few weeks afterwards you were asked to become the trust chair, and thankfully you took that role. So, and boy, did you pull weight. Okay, so thank you very much. There's this curse, may you live in interesting times, and I think the last year was pretty interesting, at least from my view. So one update about the legal part. We had a lawsuit filed against IETF in end of 2014, which took quite some thinking, and it has been affirmed that all the decisions have been affirmed, that it has been dismissed. We are still from time to time hearing things about it, and we are still spending some legal fees on countering certain claims. We also had quite a number of subpoenas, which we in this case did not list here, so I encourage you to go to the link and take a look there for more details. Another topic for the trust was to
address and think about the IANA transition, and in that context we expressed our willingness to hold IPR related to the IANA, as also discussed in the IANA Plan Working Group. The Trust made a motion to that, and that was approved. For trust finances, we are in the process of filing for tax-exempt status as 501c3. And after that status is acquired, we will be opening a trust-owned bank account, which will be funded by a small portion of the meeting registration revenue to cover the needs of maintaining the trust. So this is to maintain the trust and the IP that we have. In order to get tax-exempt status as 501(c)(3), you need to have a conflict of interest policy. So there's a whole chain of things that you need to do just in order to get a bank account, which we posted to the community, and the review period will end April 13. And I very much encourage everybody to take a look whether you think this is good or not, or whether you find some topics that we can improve, of course. Another one is about copyright statements in contributions to the IETF. We have sometimes questions about authors or co-authors that like to add additional copyright assertions or claims in an RFC. That is not so good for us, because that would kind of open the bottle and we would have to put a lawyer on every RFC, which I think you can imagine might not be a good idea if lawyers start writing RFCs. In that sense, this is more like a reminder that IETF IPR is managed consistently by BCP 78 and 79, and that it is not okay to add additional copyright assertions in contributions. The hackathon IPR was another question. So if we write, the hackathons are just amazing, and you see how much stuff we get done there. But one of the questions was, hey, okay, so the hackathon is at the IETF. So if I write code there, is this actually IETF IP contributions or not? We made the clarification that the IETF does not consider code developed at the hackathon to be inherently a contribution. However, if you give a presentation there, it is considered a contribution. Presentation, sorry, my wording. Well, and with that, I come to the close. Any questions for later, I think, for the panel? Thank you very much.
Thank you. And next up, Nomcom, Harald.
Ooh, are we on? I had trouble finding a microphone. I do have a question for the trust. Had a little issue. Oh, are we not doing questions
We're
now?
not doing questions yet. We can do it later for all of them.
Any questions? I'll hold it. Thank you.
Sorry. Not well coordinated, but questions, we have an opportunity for that later.
Thank you. This is hopefully the final report from the 2015 NUMCOM. We have completed our duties and have sincerely enjoined the IETF chair and other community members to please stay alive and active so that we don't have to do any replacement work. So, I decided to make the slides as boring as possible and only make jokes verbally. So, the ones who made decisions this time Those of you who are present, please stand up. I won't read all the names, but you have seen them. And thanks for all your hard work. So what we decided, and what basis? We had 65 nominations for the 6 positions on the ISG. 30 of those accepted them. There was not so much interest in being on the IB this time. Only 24 people were volunteered, 15 of which accepted the volunteering. And we had more than 700 pieces of written feedback to go through. And at least one interview per nominee. And we talked to a lot of people. So with all this in our heads, we came to some conclusions. The NOMCOM is out to find the best leadership it can for the IETF, according to the NOMCOM's opinion of what is needed. Our decisions are guided by the input we get, but in the end, they're the ones to decide. So, Alisa Cooper, returning. Alexei Melenkov, who is new, but has been on the ISG before. Alia Atlas, returning. Mirja Kulevin, which is new to the ISG. Benoit Claes. I don't pronounce your name correctly, Benoit, sorry. Suresh Krishnan and Kathleen Moriarty. These are the new ISG members, and you will see them on stage shortly. On the IB, we have Brian Trammell, Eric Normark, Joe Hildebrand, Lee Howard, who is new, and Martin Thompson, who is new, and Ted Hardy. These will be serving on the IB, and you will also see them on stage shortly. This has been quite a bit of work, and I'm very happy to say that we already know who gets to do it next time. Lucy Lynch has volunteered to be the NOMCOM chair for 2016. And I wish to thank all those who were willing to serve, all those who provided feedback, because a lot of the stuff that we base decisions on, we did not know going in. And it's your feedback that gave us the information that made us able to take these decisions with confidence. All of those who were selected, of course, willing to pick up the burden, and especially those who were not selected, but still participated in good faith in the process. Some of the scariest situations for a selection committee is when you have only one candidate and you realize you're not happy. In cases where we have multiple candidates, multiple people willing to serve, at least we can get the discussion started. We can see, this is the person that IETF needs at this juncture. And this is the person who is able to step up if the other one can't make it. So volunteering is terribly important. And being gracious about not being selected, thank you. And everyone who assisted us in getting this far, thank you very much. We are preparing some notes that we will share with the community about our experience so far, mostly about internal process and things that could do slightly better, and perhaps the next NAMCOM can learn from it. We're going to file these some public place, just because then it's public, then we don't have to worry about who sees them. But they're not ready yet. They will be announced. And with that, thank you.
Thank you. And next up, we're going to talk about RFC editor matters. Heather?
Hello, everybody. This is a lot of people. How nice. I'm just going to bring up two things. First, and this isn't on slides, but it's probably the most common question I've received this week. Yes, I know that this past Friday was April 1st. No, we did not publish any April Fool's RFCs. This was not a change in policy. This was because of a very, very light submission. Not many people submitted anything. We had to. So, no, it's not a change in policy. If you would like to submit something for next year, please feel free to do so. Okay, I think at this point, I don't have to ask you if you have heard that we are changing the RFC format. Everyone knows this? Yes? Okay, if you don't know this, look at the person next to you. They probably can tell you a little bit about it. But for everybody else, which I suspect is the majority of folks in the audience, yes, work is still happening. We've just finished community comment period, and we are incorporating the comments received into the documents, which means, no, there's nothing for you to do right now. But I don't want you to be shocked when things start changing later this year. I'm very hopeful that we will have the RFP out before Berlin, and perhaps even have bids in place for the code work that will be necessary in order to make this happen. If you still have no idea what I'm talking about, come find me later, or there's a really wonderful poster, I'm very fond of this poster, downstairs in sub 2, and you can look at that and at least get some start of an idea of what's happening. And that's it, short and to the point.
Thank you. And next up, we will be talking briefly about trends that are affecting the IETF external trends. Alia, can you come up? Uh-oh.
I sent you the PDF. Should be up there too.
Try again.
Yeah.
No, we do not have that. Let me just try this. That's optimistic. Yes. Slight technical problems. If there's an engineer in the room, please come up front.
Waste everyone's time while we're going. So I'll get just started while we wait for getting the slides up. They're deeply amusing, so you'll want to see them anyway. But basically, I'm here to report back from a design team that's looking at the trends and observations about the environment around the IETF and what's been going on, reflecting a little bit now that the IETF is 30, because it's really time to plan for the next 15 years and see what the world we live in and how to make it work and how to have the IETF keep evolving and doing really great stuff. Do I have slides yet?
So I'll tell you about the slides. So the first thing about the slide is, just like the IETF, we've made a huge, huge impact on the world, and we all know that. To some extent, we're sort of like the goose that laid the golden egg, except the golden egg's eaten the world, and now we're looking at it saying, that's great, the world's changed because of us. And there's so many things we can take advantage of too, and have been. You've been hearing about it here, we've been doing it, but let's talk a little bit more. Hold on a second. First page, there we go. Nice first one. Thanks, Harry. So what's changed? We have amazing collaboration tools. I mean, MeetEcho, I remember my first IETF. We had nothing like this. RTC Web's made a huge impact. There's a lot of collaboration tools, open information. It's not just the open source stuff, it's the fact that the data's out there. There's information out there. It's so easy to learn. And what this has meant is now we're doing a lot more things online, just like we started, years ago when we started doing everything on email. Virtual work life's replacing. We're getting it's replacing travel. It's replacing a lot of the in-person meetings that we've had. We've got open standards. We have open communication between organizations, between businesses, and we've got running code that we even share. So we can get a lot of just permissionless innovation, the ability to innovate above the stable platform that we've been providing and evolving is awesome. And then because of all of this, of course, the internet is just critical to public and private life. People who are 30, under 30, they can't imagine what the world was without the internet. I didn't hit the internet till I got to MIT as an undergrad, and I can't imagine what the world was like back when I was a kid. It's made a vast difference. But what that means is, shockingly, we're all still human, and we still live in communities. And that means that this technology, the improved communication, there's a huge impact also on policy and the public policy and politics. And that's informed by our technology, and we're also seeing it coming and shaping IETF technology. This is great. We're living in the world we helped create, and it's full of opportunities. We need to become more effective in our internet world. So I can't promise that this particular RFC was written on a typewriter quite as antique as this, but we've come a really long way. We've changed our way of doing things from how it was to how it is, and all of the experiments we're doing, whether it be with GitHub or with various types of online document editing, Etherpad. We're just doing that now. And we're going to keep changing because we're going to keep taking advantage of the technology and the collaborative abilities that we've enabled. And one of the ways we also need to continue is to expand the community, to expand our social circle, to expand the people and the viewpoints with which we collaborate. We need to be adding more people in. Come on up and join us. One of these things, I like to refer to it as low volume participants. We have a lot of people who come here physically, but what we also need is to keep the operators, the developers, the researchers doing their day jobs and being comfortable and able to participate in the low volume way that they want to bring in all of those insights and keep going. And then we need to work, and I had no idea before I became an AD how much of an internet ecosystem is out there because, routing's at the bottom and apps and DNS and so on are way up higher. But there's a huge ecosystem, internet ecosystem of policy and politics that our friends ISOC partners with us and helps come and consult with us and give us some clue on what's going on. And that's huge, and we need to continue to work in that way because if a tree falls in the forest, no one hears, doesn't matter. We need to take the great technology and get word out there of what we're doing, of what's technically possible to understand policy and concerns about the technology and reflect back what's feasible in a way that reflects our values as the IETF. We have really sturdy roots. And they help keep the IETF grounded during this time as things are changing rapidly, which is awesome. At the beginning, there were 30 people, simple idea, rough consensus, and running code. And we built the IETF, the technical expertise, people, researchers, developers, operators, with our mission, right? The goal of the IETF is to make the internet work better. We've been doing a great job, and we've got more to do. But the question, as we look at these changes in trends in the environment, is how can we continue to be true to our roots, thrive in this world, and create the future internet we need? There's a lot of enthusiasm for supporting the IETF. You just heard about more global IETF host sponsors, which is wonderful. There's a lot of business and organizations that want to help. ISOC goes out and helps make that happen. The IETF, if nothing else, watching some of the IANA transition discussion, the IETF is a trusted technical authority. People respect the work we do. They know that we understand the technology, and they know that we care that it makes the internet keep going and get better. The Internet Society is redesigning the Open Internet Endowment to be focused only on the IETF. It's renamed the IETF Endowment. This is really exciting because we need to have help in order to have the IETF transition to away from a funding structure that's based on physical meetings. We need to have the ability to have a sustainable funding structure. We'll still have meetings, but the question about how we grow and increase remote participation in the physical meetings or additional hubs shouldn't be tied to worries about the finances. And we're really lucky that we've got a lot of friends who want to help us. It just makes me so happy. So, one of the other things, so that's covers some of the funding pieces. We also need to expand the motivations for IETFers and supportive organizations to come and participate and increase the ways to effectively participate. It shouldn't be hard. We should be requiring technical expertise and hopefully a modicum of social skills, but we shouldn't be making people jump through archaic tools and processes. We should be working on making it effortless, so the ideas come through. So that's what I see as the IETF future. We're going to spread the idea, grow the community, rough consensus and multi-stakeholder. The remote participation just keeps getting better. Please give feedback. Of course it can improve. That's what we do as engineers. We find the problems and we fix them. I think we should be encouraging IETF hubs. We've talked about remote hubs, which tend to be fixed on having bidirectional communication or time-shifted communication with the physical meetings. But the IETF needs to be is clocked at a higher rate. It's very easy as an individual participant to go away and think, oh yes, right, the meeting, I need deadlines. As an AD, we just keep going. Things keep happening, and you all need to too. And that's one of the advantages of doing something like IETF hubs. We can get some location-based active communities so that you can have time whiteboarding with other people who are enthusiastic, do the technical sharing, hackathons, share share code, as well as participate remotely via the hubs. And of course, there's always social. There's two things that really tie us together. One is our love of technology and finding the good practical idea that we need. And the other, it's just the joy of finding somebody else, that one or five other people who really understand what you're talking about and having the ability to have an awesome technical discussion that really solves a problem. And I think we can do that in local communities as well. We need to do, and have been doing, running code. Obviously, we have been working on a focus around hackathons, better interactions with open source. Code Match is coming along. I'm told I can go see a demo very soon, like this week. And we need to evolve the hacking and running code culture. But we need to do that with your thoughts, not just ours. We're a few folks. The community is where we have strength, figuring out how to do this, experimenting. And spread the IETF idea. communicate what we're doing. It's very easy to be inward focused. We also need to be outward focused. And then we also need to be aware of new technologies, new focuses and communities that may be coming and joining us because they want standardization. And they see the IETF as an excellent place to do it. We need to be welcoming. So, the IETF is our changing system. When I first came to the IETF, one of the challenges, because I wasn't one of the ones, who actually made the initial pass, one of the challenges was going from thinking about the IETF and the internet architecture as this rigid structure that you learned and that's just the way it was. And instead, I like to think of it kind of like a Minecraft castle, where you can just go and build some more species on or blow it up. Sometimes a creeper comes along and you're like, crud, and then you build it better. It's ours to modify. And the thing here is, organizations are systems. This is our environment, it's our system, and we have the opportunity to grow it to be better going forward. It's been great. We've still got more things to change and do. We're not the frog who's oblivious to the outside world. We're going to make those changes. And we've been making these changes. Change is constant. That's part of technology. That's part of the world we all live in. And you can see 10 years ago, we didn't have the IAOC and so on. And then we went and we did it, and now it's just the way it is, right? We can do this. So hopefully I've got you thinking. And probably you're wondering, yeah, those are nice words, but now what? So, of course, I can tell you about the draft to go read, but that's just our ideas. What we really want is your ideas. How should the IETF adapt and improve? What guidelines, what principles are important as we do this? And what are the goals for this conversation? Well, I do routing. I think the conversation really ought to converge so we actually get somewhere and get some direction set. And we need volunteers. We already have them. I can tell you about probably a dozen different experiments, ways people are playing to see how we can do better. We need you to keep doing that and come back and report and say, this is what's working, this is what isn't working, and this is what I learned. And remember, the trick isn't doing the simple and the easy and succeeding the first time. The trick is pushing ourselves and trying different things so that we stretch and get better and being willing to keep trying even when your first guess didn't work. And finally, we have to work on internet timescales. Experiment, adapt. I hope all of this is going to come to what we really need, which is the IETF broad consensus so that we can actually do significant change. So there's a mailing list, of course, for discussion with facilitators now to assist. In person, for those of us who are here, it's all of us, usually in smaller groups, but I'm sure there might be some conversation later on too. So thanks very much to the design team, and thanks to the IETF for the roots. It's been awesome, and I look forward to our exciting future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next part is an unfortunate one, and I don't like doing it. I don't like the fact that it's going to be long. We have lost some friends. Some people who've been at the IETF, who many of us knew, and I thought it would be appropriate to just go through their names and show a few pictures, and then have a moment of silence. First one, Chris Elliott, known for many things, including being the knock guy, the person who rewires hotels in Paris. Tom Taylor, who worked on real-time communications, among other things. Rob Blockchill, chairman of RIPE. Joyce Reynolds, IETF leadership and RFC editor. And Ray Tomlinson, use the @ for separation in the email addresses. And it is indeed sad to have lost this many people that we knew. And I want us to think about them for a moment in silence. Thank you. And let's keep these people in our memories also in the future. And if I recall correctly, we are going to talk about the Postal Award. Kathy?
Thank you, Yari, for allowing us those couple of minutes. We now turn to the award that's also in memory of one of the great members of the IETF family. I am very pleased to again open the nomination period for the 2016 Jonathan B. Postel Service Award. You'll see on the list of recipients at least two of the friends we just remembered, and very wonderfully our very present Scott, who was the second award winner. This is quite an impressive and beautiful group. Rob was here just last year standing before us as a recipient. This service award was established by the Internet Society to honor a person or an organization that has made outstanding contribution and service to this community, including sustained and substantial technical contributions, service to the community, and leadership. The award committee is comprised of past honorees. It's a fabulously rich experience to be with those honorees and hear how they select the honoree this year, which will be the 18th year that an honoree is selected. Nomination period is open right now. It'll close on May 18th. You are asked and actually urged to make nominations. The nominations will be accepted at internetsociety.org/Postel and will be announced at IETF 96. Thank you very much for giving this some thought and for participating in this important award. Thank you. Thank you, Yara.
And speaking of IETF 96, Tom, can you come up?
Good evening, everyone. I have the great pleasure and fun to invite everyone to our next IETF meeting in just over 3 months now in Berlin. And as host, Juniper Networks would like to invite the IETF community to join us there. One of the really great pleasures I have tonight is to give you a little bit of an advance taste of the meeting. Of course, you all know the symbol of Berlin there, the Brandenburg Gate. But I would also like to tell you that the social event that we have arranged will be held in one of Berlin's most outstanding and beautiful tourist attractions. We have been able to arrange to have our social event at what is known as the Orangerie, which is part of the Schloss Charlottenburg, or the Charlottenburg Palace, which is just, as you can see from the photo, is a really beautiful, beautiful site. So I would like to offer this opportunity to invite everyone from the community to attend both the IETF meeting and don't miss the social event, because we think it will be a truly special evening. I would also like to thank the team of folks from Juniper who have actually been preparing for this event now for quite some time, and we'll continue to work between now and the next meeting closely with Ray. I want to thank Ray also for all the help he has given us in preparing. So thank you very much, and we'll see you in just over 3 months, I hope, if you come to Berlin. Thanks again.
I am looking forward to that. And now I think it's the IAB part. So, Andrew. Sorry.
Hi there, I'm Andrew Sullivan, and I am the IAB chair. Apparently I did something in a previous life, but in any case, I want to thank my colleagues for having selected me as their chair. I am surprised by their confidence, but it's very honoring. So I just wanted to mention, we had an experiment last time where we ran a much shorter report up here, and we got a lot of good feedback because you don't really like to listen to me blather. So we posted a report the other day, and that's in the mail archive, so please have a look at it, and I'm going to go through a few things here quite quickly. So these are the things that the IAB does and some things that we've done. But before I go on into the rest of the report, I want to thank our colleagues who are departing. Harold already mentioned that we have some new members, and of course we have some departing members. So I'd like to invite Marc Blanchet to come up here. Mary is, alas, not able to be with us, and as far as I know, she is not in a box either. Okay, so we don't have Mary remotely, but I would like to thank Mark in the meantime. I'm afraid that one of the things that happens to you when you join the IAB is you have these long days, and somebody comes up to you and says "Iana" in your ear, and you get all dangerous. And so we decided to provide some relief. Okay, so there are a number of things that we've done recently, and you can all look at these in your spare time, and there are words about them on the in the report that we gave on the mailing list. Obviously, later, if you have questions for us or anything like that, you should feel free to ask us about them, or of course about the various documents that we've been working on. But I do want to spend a little bit of time briefly talking about this issue because it's come up more than once. So as you know, the IAB runs workshops from time to time, and these workshops are intended to allow us to get started on a bunch of work. The IAB, as you know, doesn't make standards, but from time to time we think that there's an issue or something like that, and we try to figure out what it is, because I know this is incredible to believe, but the IAB doesn't know everything. And so what we try to do is invite people who are experts in the area and bring them together in a workshop of some kind. We've had a lot of people asking, could you please have could you please make this more open? Could you have more remote support? Could you have, remote participation and so on? And we understand this desire, and we also feel it. But we've thought a great deal about this, and we posted a detailed explanation of the IAB's views about this at that link there. Joe Hildebrand posted it. The key thing about this is that there are some things that just don't work that well when you've got a lot of remote support, right? So you have to have people stand in the pink box and all the rest of those things. And the point of the workshop is really just to get some informal interaction. And remember, the whole point of these workshops is to begin work, to get some things kicked off, not to make a decision. So we try to work in these small groups. The other thing about it is that there are occasions when we have to use Chatham House or something like that. There is another factor as well, and that is remote support is not free. And we try to run these workshops on, a shoestring. We usually get some sponsorship, somebody hosts it, and so on. And if they don't have all the facilities, and we commit, to having remote support every time, then we actually just can't use those facilities. So there are many reasons why we think that it would not be ideal. What we do think is that program committees can make this decision every time they're setting up a workshop. So if there is some kind of support or something like that, we can go ahead and do that, but it doesn't always work, and I think that that's going to continue to be up to the program committees. Nevertheless, we do think that there are some potential ways to do some of these things in the future. We've talked a little bit about whether it would be possible to arrange a workshop that was done entirely virtually. I don't think we've figured out exactly how that would work yet, but we've discussed it a little bit. So there are possibilities, and of course the technology keeps getting better. So for all I know, in a year, getting everybody onto a plane would be just a waste of time. So with that, that's the situation that we have with that. Given that very topic, though, we have had a workshop recently, and in order to talk about it, I'm going to invite my colleague Dave Taylor up here.
So it was about a year ago at the IETF 92 plenary that we gave a report out on an IAB RFC that we just written on smart object architecture. And one of the issues that we discussed in that plenary was the fact that we saw many different definitions or schemas being developed for the same class of object across the industry. There are many different organizations and SDOs and alliances and stuff involved, and we observed that this was largely not an IETF problem, right? Because the IETF may do schemas for infrastructure devices like bridges and switches and routers, but it doesn't really do schemas for light bulbs and sensors and things like that. And so this was a problem outside the scope of the IETF, and so as part of the follow-up of that discussion, we decided to host a workshop to try to get a lot of those organizations together in a room to compare notes. Okay? So many of them had never met each other before or had not talked to each other before. And we wanted them to get together to say, how can we best improve the ability to interoperate between them? Okay? How can we make the situation better? Because it's not something that the IETF can do. This is specifically not an IETF workshop. It was an IAB-hosted workshop. And so we had more submissions than we expected, right? Our host, which was Ericsson, had a room size that would accommodate about 40 people maximum. And so we actually had 66 submissions, which is really good. Okay? We accepted 42 of those, knowing that not everybody could make it, and so we actually had 37 attendees, which is kind of right on target for what we wanted. And we were pleased to see that there was a very large number of organizations involved that actually do data models or languages or translators or what have you. And so across cloud services and device vendors and hub vendors and SDOs, we had a very broad base of people there. So we were actually pleased that we could see many different aspects of the problem that were being discussed. And so when we picked the date, we picked a date in Silicon Valley where the Zigbee Alliance had already picked hosting a meeting in that same general vicinity in that particular week. And so we sort of ended up co-locating in terms of general vicinity and time with the Zigbee Alliance as sort of oh, gee, guess that's actually a good thing. Let's do that. Maybe there's some opportunities. We'll get some cross attendance or something. Get some Zigbee people to submit submission papers and so on. And so what we found is right after we discussed the date, or right after we announced the date of the workshop, several other organizations then decided to do the same thing and co-locate meetings in Silicon Valley that same week. So shortly after we had the announcement of the workshop date, we had the IRTF, Thing-to-Thing Research Group, decided to co-locate a meeting. Right? The OCF decided to co-locate a meeting, and so on. And since we picked Thursday and Friday, they started meeting earlier that week. And so what we saw is there was various joint meetings that sprung up earlier that week, even before the workshop, where people were in town because they had been made plans to come to the workshop. They co-located meetings there, and there were several joint meetings that were open to the public. There's at least 2 of them on the slide there that were public meetings, even though at least one of those organizations is a members-only organization. There was public meetings that was joint that put people into the room that had never met each other before. Those were extremely productive for those of us that were there, right? There was a lot of great sharing of information there, and so as a result, what we observed is that even before the workshop had began, it had already met some of its original goals. Okay? That was actually pretty impressive to us as the program committee. And so you can follow up and you can see what we've done. The public mailing list is open, which is the one that's there. You can find on the main workshop page, the links on the previous site, has these links here. The meeting notes, there's about 23 pages of meeting notes up in the doc there that you can read through at your leisure. That's what we will use to prepare the workshop report shortly that will be put into the workshop report RFC. And one of the outcomes afterwards is because the goal of the workshop was ideally to be this one-time event that would generate those other organizations kind of doing stuff together that the IAB didn't have to facilitate afterwards. Things would kind of take on a life of their own. That was kind of our goal, is to say, what could we accomplish that was there? And one of those things was this notion of having a shared repository of how do I find links to different organizations' data models, right? There's many different repositories that are out there. How do you find out what their meeting schedules are in case you want to co-locate a meeting? That's actually really hard to find. And so we're creating a public wiki where organizations can share links to those things here. And so that's what's, there's a site that's created. It's largely absent. We just posted the link to it, and so we expect that to be filled in shortly, but the link is up and live now for anybody to contribute to. And again, those links are all on the main workshop page hosted off of the IAB site. So if you have any questions, we'll take them at the mic later. Thanks.
Thank you, Dave. Now, I mentioned that the purpose of many of these workshops is to get things, some work started. And of course, the way that we get work or the way we organize work in the IAB these days is in our programs. So Suzanne Wolf, who is the lead for the Names and Identifiers program, is going to come up and talk a little bit about what that program is doing.
I understand. I want to know how to advance this forward. Okay, thank you, Andrew. As we mentioned, one of the ways that the IAB organizes work is into the programs. The Names and Identifiers program is actually, I believe, still the newest that we have. And it was formed, let's see, when we wrote the description, we've got too much text here, but it was important to cover various topics concerning naming and resolution, identifiers, not just domain names, but all identifiers, and the resolution of them in the internet. Well, that sounds a lot like boiling the ocean, but So we narrowed it down a little bit to some broad goals, some things that we wanted to look at. How are we using the terminology around names and identifiers and resolution in the internet context? We wanted to do kind of an overview, or what are the areas where naming and protocols and infrastructure are important to the work of the IETF. And we wanted to have some thoughts on the practical side of what insight we could gain. We wanted to be able to talk with protocol designers about what it was important to know about naming and naming systems and resolution as they were either developing new naming systems for new protocols or reusing what we already had. Because we actually already, we see many cases, more than is initially obvious, where we have IETF working groups, we even have efforts outside of the IETF where people need naming systems, need naming resolution, and we were hoping to make some progress on some general principles and observations that will help them avoid some of the challenges that we've seen with overlapping or ambiguity or collision in different naming systems. So we started to look at some of those things, and at this point we have a couple of drafts that we've done some work on. If you thought that the concept of domain names was specific to the domain name system, protocol, and database, that's actually not the case. There's a lot more history and semantics to domain names than is immediately obvious. So Ed Lewis has a draft that the program has been discussing on the history and definitions, which goes to the terminology item we're trying to talk about. Brian Trammell has been doing some thinking about what an idealized naming system would do, what the requirements and characteristics of doing naming better would look like, which we hope is going to feed into the goal of guidance to protocol designers. Ted Hardy has also written a draft around the insight that we don't always keep in mind, that names and naming exist in contexts, and that thinking hard about not only the naming system, but the context in which it will be used and the context in which it will have to interoperate with other naming systems needs to be done, and needs to be, in some ways, probably done better. We also did the arcing BOF yesterday, which we're still assessing the outcomes and sort of pondering next steps. But it was designed, the intention was to look beyond DNS as the sort of default context for internet names, particularly for domain names, and to work on the guidance to protocol designers we talked about. So it's not clear yet where a lot of this is going, but it's starting to feel like it's got some momentum to it. There is a public mailing list, as with all the programs. There's a public mailing list for discussion. If you're interested in these topics, go ahead, read the drafts, comment, join the mailing list, and we will be probably among the possible outcomes of the arcing BOF, maybe more work for the program also. So if you're interested, please follow that, and any of us would be happy to talk to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Suzanne. One of the things that is important to notice here, right, is that the arcing BOF was an IETF BOF, and this is an example of the way that the IAB, comes up with a thing, says, oh, gee, this is kind of a problem, and tries to kick it out. So there's no effort on the part of the IAB to keep everything inside the programs, and maybe that's because we're lazy and we want to give somebody else the work, or maybe it's just because we know where we're not supposed to go. In any case, the rest of the programs are listed here, and you can see them there. I want to mention as well that we have mailing lists for all of the architectural programs that we work on. So there is a pattern to these, obviously, and you can just join them. But generally speaking, it's the program, short name, and discuss after it. There are some legacy ones that don't work that way. In any case, those are them. Now, rather than listening to me blather away up here, I'm going to end this and invite, first of all, the IAB to come up. So if we can ask the IAB to come up on this side, and you can sit yourselves down. There are some chairs. The chairs are marked, Mark is going to bring his wine. Did you bring enough to share? Oh, wait, no, we were the ones who were sharing. I think I'm just doing this gradually so that we've got a little bit of traffic control up here. And we've got the IESG can come up and join on this side. And I guess actually we can parallelize this. The IOC and trustees can come up and sit on that side. Not crowding? No. Try not to crowd. Yes. Oh, we didn't put it down. I see. So we're going to do the round of introductions now. Just some instructions to the people in the back row up here. If you're sitting back there, please stand when you introduce yourself so that everyone can see you. So why don't we start down there in the back and we can work our way across.
Ray Pelletier, IED.
The microphone.
Mike. We got mics. Hello, breaker one. There, it's working. Ray Pelletier, IED.
Kathy Brown, the Internet Society.
Robert Sparks, IAB.
Russ Housley, IAB.
Heather Flanagan, RRC Series Editor.
Brian Trammell, IAB.
Ralph Drums, IAB. Lee Howard, incoming IAB.
Eric Nordmark, IAB.
Martin Thompson, IAB.
Marc Marchais, not planning to come here, but I've been asked to come.
Joel Yegley, Operations and Management.
Stephen Farrell, Security.
Alyssa Cooper, Applications in Real Time.
Suresh Krishnan, Incoming Internet.
Martin Stiemerling, Retiring Transport AD.
Alberto Ratana, Routing.
Deborah Brungard, Routing. Mia Kulewind, Incoming Transport.
Spencer Dawkins, Continuing Transport.
Terry Manderson, Interior.
Brian Haberman, Outgoing Snarky Int AD.
Benoit Claes, Operation and Management.
Ben Campbell, Application in Real Time.
Alexei Melnikov, Incoming Applications in Real Time.
Aaliyah, Atlas, Routing.
Barry Lieba, Departing at.
Leslie Daigle, IAOC.
Yariako, IETF Chair.
Andrew Sullivan, IAB Chair.
Suzanne Wolf, IAB.
Dave Taylor, IAB.
Joe Hildebrand, IAB.
Ted Hardy, IAB. Tobias Gunram, IAOC, IETF Trust Chair.
Lou Berger, IAOC.
Benson Schlieser, IAOC and Trust.
Scott Bradner, IAOC until June.
All right, and we are all here so that you can make questions at random order to any of us. So go ahead. And were you first or they?
I think I was first. And since I should probably get back up there afterwards, I will restart by saying Ted Hardy, IETF participant. First off, I'd like to start by thanking Fred Baker very much for his work on the meeting venue document for the IAOC, which I read with interest, and in particular to call out the good work he did in creating Section 3.1 on inclusiveness, which articulates the very important principle that we should make sure our venues are inclusive enough to permit people who want to participate in the IETF to do so freely. Next, I must say with some disappointment that despite 2 drum rolls, Singapore clearly does not qualify as one which is fully open and inclusive for people like me. It both criminalizes and medicalizes same-sex behavior between men, and it denies the possibility of people who are in such relationships to have children. As someone whose family is composed of myself, a husband, and a child, I will not be able to bring my family to IETF 100. I also would like, as a courtesy for those of you who made that decision to have it in such a place, to leave your own families at home. For those of us who are not capable of bringing ours, if you agreed to that, do us that courtesy. Lastly, I wish to thank very much those who made the decision to bring us to Argentina, and in particular our Argentine hosts. This is the most welcoming society in South America for people like me. Gracias a sus bienvenidas a todos de nosotros y a todos de nuestras familias, de mi corazón.
Don't see anyone jumping up here to provide response or comment, but going to the left mic.
Philip Ann Baker. I have a couple of concerns to do with the conflict between permissionless innovation and consensus. Looking at the list recently, there seemed to be a conflict between people saying, I want to do this thing, and, oh, well, other people don't agree. And it seems to me that the gatekeeper function of the IETF, stopping bad things happening in the internet, seems to be rather overemphasized, particularly at the application area of the stack. And in particular where I see it is in code point registries. Now, I don't want to get into cryptography and certain political issues there. But when I was asking about a particular registry and asking, why is this registry specification required? I got no answer to that except, well, the working group decided that. And I'm thinking, well, should working group consensus be that there should be a gatekeeper on innovation? Is that something that working group or even IETF consensus should be sufficient for? And what I would like ISG and IAB to do, I think that there should be criteria that come down from the top on policy level that are designed to protect permissionless innovation. And if somebody is asking for any restrictions on code point registration, they should have a damn good reason. And that reason should be specified and not, well, the working group decided and we're not going to tell you. And these reasons should be either there aren't very many code points to allocate, or there are real security issues that have to be considered and specified, or of that kind. I think that there should be real policy restrictions on the introduction of gatekeepers. And it's not an abstract question either. If you say specification required, that means that I cannot use a proprietary protocol with that code point. It means that I can't have an experimental protocol unless I produce a specification. And it means that I have to go through another set of mailing lists and ring kissing. Ring kissing is not permissionless.
Okay, so I think Barry wants to answer. I just wanted to quickly say that I actually do agree with your comments. A lot of the times we made too strict rules for the registry allocations, and we've been going through some of them and fixing them. That being said, I'm not sure I want to stand here and say that we should override what the working group consensus is. But the working group should maybe think about how strict or loose they want to do. Barry?
Yes, absolutely. And I've been pushing back on working groups, asking if they really need the strict policies that they've put in, if they need strict, well, one of the ones in particular is where they want an expert reviewer in addition to IETF consensus, for instance, and what that means. That said, I think we need leadership from above, as we've been doing with pushing back. But the IETF works on a bottom-up process where the working groups make the decisions, not us. And we can push back on them, but ultimately we need to abide by the consensus that the community has. So I absolutely agree with you, and I think we all need to join some of us who are pushing back on this and push back on it harder.
No. With respect, I am somebody who doesn't have a lot of influence. You are people who have a lot of influence. I look to you to protect my rights against arbitrary decisions. And I don't think that this is a working group decision. If you have a working group that creates a gatekeeper function, and that gatekeeper function is not accountable to anybody, is not appealable, that is a problem. Now, do you really want me to start? I think that there should be a process, and that process should be looking at what the principles of the IETF are, and not what the prejudices of a small group of people who met in a working group.
I don't think we should get into too much back and forth, but I do want to answer that it is appealable and it is accountable. But we have influence, you have influence, perhaps we have more, but we don't have authority. We can't demand that working groups do a certain thing. We can only give guidance and push back and hope that the community comes to a reasonable consensus. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and there's also some practical work involved, like identifying the cases where we've gone too far as a community and fixing them, and that does take work. So perhaps that's something that some of us can volunteer for. And I think, Pete, you're next.
Pete Resnick. Before I ask my question, does anybody on the IOC wish to address Ted's comment?
So I'll take that. I'll take that. Yari asked me when Ted made his comment whether I wanted to respond, and I was like, well, what response is there really? Because Ted made some very excellent points. And anything that I could follow up with, anything that we could follow up with would just sound like it's excusatory. So excellent input. Thanks for the input. We do what we can, trying to accommodate all perspectives as we can understand them. We are never going to pick sites that work for everybody for any number of reasons, but as I said, point taken, heard, thanks.
Lou Berger, also IAOC, I'd like to add to that. I think we could do better. And I think having that input allows us to consciously address that point in future selection process. So I think it was very useful for us to hear that. I think it's important to capture it in the document that Fred is working on, and I think we should have it as an explicit discussion point. So I think it was a very useful thing for me to hear as an IAOC member, as well as on the meeting committee. So I appreciate the comment, and I hope we'll do better.
So to my question, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Stephen.
I think, I don't know, Mike, yeah, great.
Yeah.
Great. I think at least an oops would be good. I think at least an oops would be good.
Pete?
Yeah, so a question mostly to the trust, just because I want to hear what the legal opinion of this is, but it's going to transfer to the rest of you in different ways. I was working on a BCP document, one that other folks in other organizations thought, well, we might want to have some of that text, because that text would be really good for our procedures. It was a procedural BCP document. Of course, our RFCs say on them quite specifically, you can't steal pieces of text from this in large quantities because the copyright notice says you can't do that. Now, luckily, there's an out clause, which is each of the authors of this BCP, one of them was me, can go ahead and publish that same text without the RFC boilerplate any old place we want, which we proceeded to do, and I had to jump through a couple of hoops to get Qualcomm to give me perfect rights to do that, which they happily did, and that all worked out, except from our document, we can't say, go ahead and copy this. We have to say in sort of off the beaten path places, if you would like to steal this text, go look over there. And I thank my co-author for standing up the website to do that. But it did occur to me that there really doesn't seem to me to be a downside to the IETF allowing republication of parts of our process documents. I understand what the problem is with people being able to claim they are republishing our standards. That's sort of why we set up that copyright boilerplate, because we didn't want people doing that, because that's a valuable thing. But for our process documents and some informational documents, it would seem to me good to have a way to say, these things you can go off and copy elsewhere. I'm wondering if there are bad legal implications, which why I started with the trust, but then maybe to the IAB or IASG about whether we could pull something like that off.
As the author of the, or editor of the document which currently prohibits you from doing that, I think it's a very good point, and we should, or people after me, since I'm wandering off, should revisit that. It's in a specific point in a specific RFC, and 3978, I think. And we're revising 3979 right now, as Yari mentioned. There's no reason that 10 years of experience in 3978 shouldn't also be taken into account. So I think you have a very good point. The issue has been in the past of one where the fear of people taking pieces of text and modifying them and then somehow implying that it's the original. But for the kinds of documents you're talking about, there might be a reasonable thing to say it's okay. We still wouldn't want them to claim it's the original, but it's probably something really worth talking about. But we did talk about it rather long time when we did 3978. And the conclusion not roughly reached at, but very strongly reached at, was to have the text that's there now. So, but it's time.
So I just wanted to add to what Scott said, and I agree with what he said, but I wanted to point out that this particular case, I felt that we handled in a fairly reasonable manner. It's the general case that we need to discuss. So in this, just for your information, in this particular case, like the web page that points to these documents on the IETF web, it does also point to the author's version and provides information about the copyright situation. And we've actually been contacted by several organizations who are interested in this. We've also personally communicated the situation there. And thank you, Pete, by the way, for writing that document. It's been really in high demand. So thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Pete, I agree with the responses of my colleagues up here, but also wanted to note that it may well go beyond process documents. I think it's probably time to take another look and see whether we think that the terms that are currently specified actually match the way that we think authority is derived from the documents and the work that we do here, and whether there aren't other situations where we would want to relax some of what we've established already for the purposes of kind of matching how people perceive text and copies and copyrights on the internet today. So I would hope that if we do take another look, that we won't limit ourselves to process documents.
Ben Campbell, I'm going to add myself to the agreeing parade, but I'll go, I agree with Alyssa that I don't think we should limit this to process documents, and I have a specific case in point. We had a codec payload document that came in very shortly before Pete's, I think, that had exactly the same issue, and the authors were concerned about its ability to be used in certain open source areas because they wanted to be able to take the payload format and experiment with it in other ways and be able to reuse bits of documentation in their experimentation.
Alia?
Yes, I agree. Most things start with a draft, which requires someone willing to actually start typing. It'd be great to see that.
It seems I will be reduced to writing nothing but BCPs for the rest of time.
Okay. Elliot? Speak.
While you're having mic problems, I'm just going to mention to the people who are remote that we do see them in queue, and we are putting you in queue at the right place.
The mics are controlled by the man at the back, so you have to
Dave,
make sure he knows you're doing it.
Okay. Hi, everyone. It's Elliot Lear. This comment is addressed to the IAOC and a few others. First of all, I want to join in Ted's appreciation for just how well the meeting has been run here, and thank the IAOC for bringing us here. And it's been it's been an enjoyable meeting. And I want to say that there were a couple of people in the background who've been working really hard, well in advance of this meeting, before anybody would have thought about it. Both in terms of LACNIC and in particular, the guy hiding in the back there, Alvaro, has been doing some work around setting up satellites for participation. And I wonder, Alvaro, if you could take a moment and talk a little bit about the people you've been working with and how that work will progress as we leave Buenos Aires, so that we can engage the people and continue to engage the people who've been participating from Latin America. And just also a shout out to Fernando for the work that he did to set up Protosec over the weekend. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Elliot, for bringing this up. So we've been working out of the operator community, actually, here in Latin America. About 3 years ago, when the IOC announced that we were coming to Buenos Aires, we set up a task force in LACNOC. The LACNOC community, LACNIC, Inter-Society started doing education and evangelization. We figured that, of course, there were a lot of people who could participate, but many of them didn't know what the IETF was. Much less how to contribute, how to experience what we do here. And so we've been working quite a bit on getting that out here. Part of what we see this week, of course, is a lot of the remote participation. The amount of people that we've been able to talk to contact, to get to volunteer in remote participation, remote hubs, organizing students, organizing their communities is incredibly large. I couldn't even start to mention all the people because there would be too many to and I would obviously forget. The efforts, again, mostly LACNOC, LACNIC, the Institute Society. People have mentioned Christian Flaherty who's sitting over there in the middle. He has been, instrumental in getting everything around getting the word out and getting the people here and getting the organization done. Thank you.
Okay, Jim?
The IETF network, the IETF network is built using a lot of donated services and hardware from people throughout the community. And in the past, people like Cisco and others have made lots of donations. But this particular time around, we've got a number of notable things that I want to call out. Level 3 and iPlan both went through hoops to deliver the circuits we needed to make this happen here. Ubiquity gave us some small routers we use for testing, and NetBees gave us some Raspberry Pi equipment that we use for user experience monitoring. But in particular, there's one thing that definitely needs to be called out, which is that Juniper gave us 2 core routers that they've been working on for years to get to us. And I want to thank particularly Ron Bonica and Tom Walsh for all their hard work to make that happen, because these pieces of equipment are what make this all possible every time. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. Dan?
Dan York, channeling John Clenson, who's coming in remotely. John just wanted to say that much the same arguments as those that Philip made apply when, quote unquote, privacy policy starts becoming a religion that is used to block proposed work.
We were unable to hear completely here. Could you repeat that?
John's comment that he asked me to relay, or ask someone to relay, was much the same arguments as those Philip made apply when, quote unquote, privacy policy starts becoming a religion that is used to block proposed work.
Sure. I mean, I think we have many religions here. Some of them involve XML, some involve JSON, and they're all equivalently religious. I'm not sure what other comment I could make. I mean, but if there's a more specific comment about privacy, and that would be interesting to deal with, but that's about as close as I can get right now.
I think that John may be referring to a document that the IESG asked the independent stream editor not to publish because it conflicted with the pervasive monitoring prohibition.
That might be the case, or we can ask John about that. But this is a general issue, and I think part of the same answer that we gave in the earlier question, it applies here as well. I think, I don't want to sit here and override what the community thinks. The community needs to have an opinion about these different religions, and sometimes those religions, and they actually, some of them or many of them make sense, and you have some guidance on how you should do things, and it really should be the community's role in setting the bar and how that affects other things going on in the IETF. Andrew.
This is Andrew. Since John is remote, he won't be able to tell. That is all true, but I think there's another point here, and it's the difference between, whenever you make an analogy, you have to pay attention to the differences. There's a big difference between the case that Phil was talking about and the one that John just mentioned, because the IETF has consensus that pervasive surveillance is an attack on the network. And therefore, since we have that consensus, it is legitimate for the IETF to say, no, you shouldn't publish this thing that enables that. We do not have a consensus that the IETF is in charge of the internet or is the internet police or is otherwise some sort of gatekeeper function. And I think that point that Phil was making earlier is part of the difference between these two cases.
Okay, Bob?
Bob Hinden. I also want to say I think this has been a great venue and a great country, and I hope we come back. So I have two topics, so I assume I'll do one and then you go through the queue again or something. But first one's for the IAB. I was one of the people who requested that you make remote access, I'm not going to say participation, to the workshops. I mean, I personally would have enjoyed listening to your Internet of Things one. It's a topic I'm interested in. So I hope you will, and I understand the reasons why it's not quite your model, but I hope you will try and experiment with an upcoming workshop and allow people to watch it remotely. You know, the workshop invitees should be the ones who talk, but I think there's probably a lot to learn for a lot of other people. So please consider that.
One thing that is important to us is that we get the workshop reports out quickly, because that, the idea, of course, is that these things reflect what happened. As you could see from Dave's report, we've put the notes up, the raw notes up, as essentially the day that they got written. I do recognize that that's far from perfect, and I really share your desire here. But it's also the case, and I mean we see this here, right? That if the mic fails in a working room or something like that, we've got remote support, and we have to stop and reorganize things in order to deal with the AV issues. And I think that is an important factor. I think that we'll see over time, I believe anyway, that we'll see over time the technology will get easier and more ubiquitous. Our friends at MECO are doing such a fabulous job already. So I think that you'll see probably some drift in that direction. But do feel free to hold us to it, right? This is an important thing, and I appreciate the remark. I don't know if any of my colleagues have something to say about it.
So maybe I'll just add one personal perspective that, I was going to that workshop, but there was a minor accident involving horses and volcanoes and skis and such. Can happen to anybody. So I couldn't actually go. And I was in the program committee, and I did get access, but it wasn't the perfect access. But, it's not just enabling the sort of the broader community. That's one type of service for this, but it's sometimes even enabling us who are in the middle of it to be part of the discussion. And I was really sorry I could not go. It was a great workshop from all the marks that I can see. Sean, and after you, we'll do the person on the remote queue.
All right, cool. So I have two topics, both on diversity. The first one has to do with again, my name is Sean Turner. I'm on the Internet Society Board. I am not speaking for the board. I want to make that very clearly. I'd really love to have more diversity on the IAB. And that is mostly in a carrot, which I'm actually carrying, which I ate most of while I was standing in line, to make sure that people will actually put themselves up. Age, gender, sexual orientation, where they're from, everything. Give the nom-com a hard job of people to choose from. That's what you want, okay? The second point, I will say this in the way I will say it, and I apologize, I'm not picking on anyone on the IOC, but your answer sucked to Ted's question. Your response to Ted's question sucked. I really think that was horrible. I'm kind of mad that there's actually not more people behind me saying the same. I'm mad that there's not more people behind me saying the same thing. Your choice is actually making my job harder. He's one of my co-chairs on a working group. I now have to do more, all kinds of other things. I really think that we need to understand what angles of diversity you're looking at. There are many: age, gender, geographic, sexual orientation, all kinds of other things. It really, if you are missing the capability or the understanding that there's multiple things, then we need to figure out how to unseat the IOC and get more people on there that understand there's other angles. Do you understand there are more angles?
We certainly understand a lot better now than we did a little while ago. Just a second, Sean.
Fair enough. I mean, I'm a little upset, so I'm sorry.
And you and many other people in the community have a right to be upset. We blew it. We didn't think of it. But that's one of the reasons there's the BOF going on tomorrow. as to give us some awareness. There are a lot of things that we haven't known what, we've been made aware and much more sensitive to visa issues in the past. There are other things we've been made aware of, but we're not omniscient. We can't think of everything. This is something we probably should have thought of. We did not.
Tobias and Leslie?
Yeah, and I completely, excuse me, I completely agree with what Scott just said. And the one comment or almost exception to what you said, is you have to rely on the people on the IOC. I actually think it's really important that we get community input. Part of what Fred is doing is opening an avenue to document what is important to the community. And I think it's so important that we capture all the different aspects, because none of us are perfect. We can only do what our experience, and yes, more diversity is on all of our committees is really important. I'm not saying we shouldn't do that, but I'm saying we should also make sure that all the considerations that are important to the community are documented and captured so we can follow it when we forget to do the right thing. And I'll agree, we didn't do the right thing here. At least that's my personal statement. I can't speak for the whole IOC. I can only talk for myself. We didn't discuss it, or at least I didn't, and that was a mistake.
So what are the values of the IETF? Openness on many levels, permissionless innovation, you get to do lots of things. Everyone can come and participate, right? But
no one's arguing that we did wrong. No one's arguing that we did right, I'll put it that way. We blew it. And continuing to pound on it isn't going to change the past. Maybe we can change the future.
Tobias, did you want to say?
Yes.
And
yes,
then Leslie?
Yes. So to echo and one to maybe share some thinking. So to echo, yes, we don't know everything. And one of the reasons for that was indeed to do this BOF and to catalog better, to document better.
I mean, come on,
Wait,
I gotta hold
no.
up here. You didn't know about this one?
No,
You
wait
didn't think-
a second. We had actually quite extensive discussions, but not, to my recollection, not about this one. And yes, I'm guilty of that. I'd like to make a small remark. The options so we have to balance quite a number of different goals to achieve. One of them, for example, being 111 or 111 star. And the options we have in Asia are at this moment limited when it comes to availability and other requirements. So we have to balance some things. And actually sometimes there is no perfect solution. And we have to make a choice that is not good, but that is kind of the least worst choice sometimes. That's my personal opinion.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And I think it's fair.
Let's give Leslie a chance to speak.
We didn't know, or I personally didn't know, the committee.
There's a queue. Oh, okay. You're not on a queue.
Thanks. Again, I want to be very clear that that choices made by the IOC are absolutely not intended to be, they're not intentionally oblivious. Sometimes they're just naturally oblivious. But as already stated, there are a number of constraints in trying to find a good place to meet. Fact o' life. I think it could be reasonable to say, if we look out at the sea of technical community meetings that happen around the world and see apricots happening in Singapore, it's perhaps not irrational to think that it can be a workable site. So there it is. I think people we're not hearing from tonight are the people, for instance, who were unable to come to Argentina for any number of reasons, some of which might have been, equally personally restricting, such as visa problems. So there is no perfect site. I agree that we do need to get better input on making this, if the community wants to make this, the actual selection of sites, a priority for input, then we actually need to find a way to gather that community perspective long ago in the process. I mean, Ray mentioned this was over a year of negotiation on the hotel contracts, making a very complex hotel contract. How do we get the input earlier in the process so that we can have a rational, manageable approach to finding locations to meet, establishing meetings that will actually meet the expectations of the community. This is not about beliefs or emotions or trying to go against beliefs and emotions or right or wrong. This really is just a complex table of trying to get people's input and get a sense of what the community as a whole wants at the same time as we've got to write hotel contracts. We've actually got to make things that can work.
So Stephen is going to speak briefly, and then we're going to go through the remote attendees and then the remaining questions on the queues. But we are out of time already, so please be brief.
I will be brief. So I kind of disagree a little bit with Leslie. I don't think this is about expectations. This is about rights. I think the IAOC do fantastic work. They're well-meaning, and the lack of transparency is why you fuck up now and then. And that's the thing to target. It's, you know, let's be transparent, and there's many more eyeballs on the problem, and we will spot the fact that we're transgressing some rights, and which is what seems to have gone wrong a little bit here. And I'm brief. There you go.
Thank you. Can we have the remote participant ask the question?
Dave, can you rejoin? I think we double pressed the button.
Oops.
I hope you didn't press the distraction button.
What's happening here?
We heard you for a second.
Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Ah, okay. So is the volume okay?
Everything's fine.
Dandy. So this is Dave Crocker. I'm currently participating in the meetings committee, and I've been on the IOC. Tobias and Leslie said most of what I wanted to say, but I have two things to add. One is that, in fact, there has been at least one, and I think more than one, time that the meetings committee advised against a particular venue for reasons that I will call matters of principle. The current discontent is about another matter of principle. The one that we rejected was for a different issue. So the process does try to pay attention to these kinds of concerns. I'm not going to comment on the current one, but rather note that there's a guessing game that goes on because there are just so many very valid concerns that could mitigate against going to a venue. If the community wants the selection process to keep away from certain places, the community needs to develop a no-fly list, and then, and this is not currently, I believe, part of what's expected for the meeting venue discussion, but there's no reason it can't be added. But that post hoc reaction is what we'd like to avoid, and the only way to do that is specify ahead of time of where we can't go.
Thank you, Dave. And I think we're closing this topic and going to Mike.
So, okay, hi, Rich Sauls. So my question is, the mistake that was made, was it done knowingly, or did you not know that Singapore had this policy towards gay marriage?
No knowledge.
Yeah, frankly, I found out literally this evening that this was even an issue.
as a resident of North Carolina, I guess I should have been more prepared for this kind of nonsense, but I was kind of shocked to learn that Singapore had that situation. And to echo what some others here have said, you know, there is a pretty big list of things that the meetings committee looks at, things like nationalities that have visa issues and et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
The list is very long. The fact that this isn't on there is not right, but we hear you.
Thank you. Left mic.
Bob Hinden, this is a new topic. It's for the IOC and the trust. So in the slides earlier this evening, I heard that the trust was going to apply for nonprofit status and open a bank account. And I think I have a very good idea why this is being done, but there was no mention of this in the announcement. I don't think there was any announcement to the community. I personally find this a fairly big deal. And I think that you also said that there was going to be money coming from the registration fees or something like that. So I think that the trust or the IOC, or, well, you're sort of the same people, needs to tell us what's going on here. And, you know, I think the activities going on in the trust of taking the IANA IPR is a very good thing, and that's what I think this is about. It's for how to pay for the support for that. But you didn't say any of that, and I think you should tell the community what you're actually doing.
Leslie?
So it's certainly a fair point that we should probably make these points on other mailing lists. I think it is not, I think that much of this has been exposed perhaps primarily on the IANA plan mailing list, because this is indeed what's driving a lot of, well, it's driving the formalization of the trust as an organization and seeking 501c3 status. So it is probably true that those of us who've been in these discussions have been a little bit too hip deep in them to realize that there are certain details that need to get expressed a little bit beyond those boundaries.
So was it discussed in IANA plan?
Principles, I think the principles of, well, certainly the principles of what it would take to get the IETF trust to take on the IPR for the IANA transition has been discussed publicly. We spent an hour discussing it. Well, we had an hour to discuss it earlier this afternoon. So
Yeah, but I mean, there was no mention of what was just announced.
I think the...
Well,
so
I think you get
I think
my point.
yes. The dots were not connected. A formal plan has not been put forward, so on and so forth.
And I think where that money is actually coming from is also a fairly big deal.
So Bob, I know you know this better than most. The trust is its own separate legal organization. And in the trust agreement that established the trust, it was foreseen that we would have a bank account and a tax status to go with it and all that sort of thing.
My complaint is not, I think this is probably the appropriate action, and I can guess why you're doing it, but I would have liked you to tell me that. That's my comment. I understand about the trust, and, you know, it has the ability to have a bank account and all of that, but I think this got discussed in private, and it's good that you told us, but you didn't tell us why you're doing it and where the money is coming from and all of that.
So the short answer is it should have been done before.
So, Alisa, did you want to say something? No? Tobias?
Yes. So I second Benson, and I would say it got more important considering that we are about to take on more IP potentially going forward. And there's a certain fiduciary duty for the trustees to ensure that we have sufficient money to continue registering the IP that we hold. So, I mean, in the past, we have actually very little expenses from the trust. And ISOC was always very, it worked like clockwork that all these things got paid immediately. So I would say the concern was less, but going forward we will hold more IP responsibilities, and in that perspective it became more important to fulfill that fiduciary duty and to have a small amount of money that we can ensure that we are able to continue registrations and potentially pay legal fees to maintain that IP.
Thank you. And we're really out of time, so I'll let Pete say something for 30 seconds, and then Richard, and then that's it.
Luckily, the thing I have to say, I not only don't need, but ask that you do not respond to, please. There are ways of talking about the topic of how that meeting selection is going to take place, and words that keep getting used like there are things to balance. And it's a very dangerous path to go down in conversation, because there are certain things that I know you all know you don't balance. You just dismiss as, we don't possibly ever have a meeting there because of X, whatever that X may be. And whether or not the IOC in the long run decides that having laws that prevent certain people for their identity being excluded in a society is one of those X's, that's a conversation to have. But to say now it's one of those things we balanced seems like you haven't thought about the question of whether it's one of those stop items. And I see the light on, but I would ask that we not have this conversation in this forum, because it's a hard conversation to have unless you have certain experience of language about how this stuff gets said.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just want to make sure that, because I have the feeling there's a misunderstanding. So there are criteria that are yes or no. There are other criteria that do require a balance. Let's say other criteria might be how much pollution would be acceptable, how much infrastructure things would be acceptable. I'm just careful because I have the feeling you reinterpreted my statement a little bit in a way that it was not intended.
Can we take this to the meeting venue? And then Richard,
Yes, we
do you
can.
want to say something in
Yes.
10 seconds?
As with Pete, I will ask and request no response here. It was said earlier that the past is the past, and we can only influence the future. It was said earlier that the past is the past, and we can only look to the future. But I would note that IETF 100 is still even incorporating negotiation timelines some ways in the future. Given the feedback tonight and the more feedback, please, no photo, thanks. And more feedback that will be coming tomorrow, I'm sure, I would encourage the IOC to look at what change can be made and to consider what can be done, and to work with the sponsor to find what potential change might be made here.
Thank you. We've heard a lot of feedback today. That's why we're here. Thank you for that. We're done.